Hello, I'm Robert Geal, lecturer in film and television studies at the University of Wolverhampton. This presentation addresses one of the many unusual phenomena occurring in the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, most especially during the first lockdown. That is the strange compulsion for quarantining audiences to watch films about fictional pandemics, not unlike the one they were experiencing in real life. Audiences living through hard times have always responded to the bleak or escapist elements of different genres in complex ways, which is why Hollywood produced both glossy musicals and gritty film noirs during the Second World War. Facing arguably the greatest global crisis since that time, lockdown audiences simultaneously escaped to binges of Friends reruns and stared into the all-too-near abyss of thrillers about deadly pandemics. A number of newspaper articles noted the rise of pandemic films up the streaming charts, but these articles did not explain the strange pleasures of watching these films. My explanation for these strange pleasures utilizes two aspects of psychoanalytic theory. The first of these is what Fredric Jameson calls the political unconscious. Different cultures have various foundational premises that cannot be undone, but which produce contradictions and anxieties. Because these contradictions and anxieties cannot be directly addressed, they are repressed into the political unconscious, which produces fictional resolutions to those contradictions and anxieties. So to take a clear example, Victorian capitalism was a particularly cruel expression of capitalist inequality. Genuinely remedying the structural inequalities of capitalism would have needed wholesale reorganization of Victorian society and culture. This did not mean, however, that there was no awareness whatsoever of the suffering of those exposed to the horrors of poverty. Such horrors generated anxiety, and since the inequalities causing that anxiety could not be directly addressed, the repressed anxiety resurfaced in a fictional form where resolution was possible. A novel like Oliver Twist, for example, could present the scandal of child poverty and then offer an illusion of resolution to that scandal by providing a fiction in which the protagonist escapes that poverty. The political unconscious begins by exposing societal failings and then by resolving those failings. As Jameson puts it, the individual narrative is to be grasped as the imaginary resolution of a real contradiction. In my new book, Ecological Film Theory and Psychoanalysis, Surviving the Environmental Apocalypse in Cinema, I position our failure to address ongoing and impending ecological disasters within this context. We are quite aware that our behaviour is destroying the biosphere on which we depend, but this awareness is too traumatic to assimilate, and we produce fictional examples of surviving the future apocalypse. Our responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, similarly, are part of a political unconscious. When the pandemic struck, we were paralysed by the overwhelming scale of the disaster and sought out fictional resolutions of filmic pandemics, which were somewhat like the one we were experiencing, but which obeyed the logic of Hollywood filmmaking, where the virtuous survive and the guilty are punished. The second psychoanalytic component of my argument concerns the specific mechanics of how these films generate a sense of control over what are, in reality, uncontrollable events. Hollywood filmmaking places the spectator in an illusory position of perceptual mastery. This illusory mastery operates in many different ways. The spectator can be shown an important prop, or a threat to a character, or the means of escape for a character. In each of these examples, the spectator's perception can transcend that of certain characters and can be aligned with others. The spectator experiences the illusion of a perceptual mastery over the fictional world. When it comes to a real-world pandemic like COVID-19, it is not possible for us to instantly see who or what is infected. Fictional pandemic films, however, provide the spectator with mastery over the kind of information that is so lacking and so crucial, a matter of life and death potentially, during a pandemic in the real world. Steven Soderbergh's Contagion, in which, in a strange case of life-imitating art, a bat-borne virus infects humans in China and then spreads across the globe, is perhaps the clearest example of this process. The film begins with a woman, Beth, at a bar, coughing, eating peanuts, and shaking the crumbs from her fingers. "You all right?" she is asked. "Yeah, just jet lag," she replies. But the camera's movement down to the peanuts she has been touching and the beginnings of ominous, non-diegetic music allow the spectator to perceive more than this doomed person or the person that she has just infected. This perceptual mastery continues as she passes her credit card to a barmaid, and the camera holds on a close-up of the infected card as it moves through space. This pattern is repeated throughout the film as the camera lingers over touched surfaces as people pass by. Wolfgang Petersen's Outbreak repeats this convention. The film begins with a deadly outbreak of an Ebola-like virus in a village in what was then Zaire. The American military destroys the village, but nearby infected monkeys escape and bring the virus to America when one is captured to be sold as a pet. The film cuts from the monkey being captured, indicating its dangerous proximity to humans, to Ford, a military official, dismissing virologist Sam's warning that the outbreak may not have been fully contained. The spectator knows that Ford is wrong to do this, because the spectator has been granted cinematic perceptual mastery. He or she is offered the illusion that he or she can see pandemics coming in a way that a certain character here can't. These films also have examples of perceptual mastery which align the spectator with certain protagonists who know about the infection while other unimportant characters do not. During the altercation with Ford in Outbreak, for example, Sam's warning was not yet accompanied by an alignment of his and the spectator's perception, but this does come later when he inspects a patient who has not come into physical contact with another infected person. Looking up, the camera follows his gaze through a point of view shot, moving up into an air vent and then through it, before returning to Sam, who concludes, "It's airborne." In addition to perceiving what no character had seen then, the spectator is aligned with the protagonist who is most able to perceive danger and who subsequently goes on to provide a narrative resolution to the outbreak. In Contagion, the spectator shares point of view shots with government scientist Dr. Sussman looking at people coughing, touching and eating in a restaurant. And later the spectator witnesses the decision to quarantine Chicago, trapping other characters who did not have access to this perceptual information. Contagion goes so far as to raise this privileging of cinematic vision to the level of a fetish, so that when scientists identify the restaurant where human-to-human transmission first occurred, they watch CCTV footage, freeze-framing the key moments when hands shake and when a barman picks up an infected glass. Both these films resolve their fictional crises, with the outbreak halted by using the monkey's blood to create a cure, and with Contagion's longer pandemic suppressed with a vaccine. Contagion also concludes with a flashback to the incident that caused the outbreak, showing bulldozers displacing bats which drop half-eaten food into pig pens, and then following an infected pig to the restaurant where a chef then contaminates Beth. The real-world COVID-19 patient zero may be unknown, but the fictional equivalent of this pandemic allows the spectator to perceive the fictional patient zero. The film's choice to make Beth the person who brings the virus to America also operates within the context of conservative patriarchal values, because she reprises an extramarital affair when she lays over in Chicago, and her guilt for both spreading the virus and disrupting a heteronormative relationship is punished with a grisly death. Watching Contagion during lockdown also demonstrates the difference between cinematic perception and real-world perception. I watched the film through something called the Box of Broadcasts archive, which allows members of subscribing institutions to stream films and television programmes that have been broadcast on various British platforms, and which provides the dates of when the broadcasts were made. Box of Broadcasts also includes the advertisements that were originally shown along with the film or programme. The broadcast of Contagion that I watched was screened on the 29th of December 2019, prior to any knowledge about COVID-19 outside China, but during a period when the virus was already spreading between humans. A spectator watching the film when it was broadcast, therefore, was experiencing all of the illusory cinematic sensations of perceptual control over the fictional narrative threat at the very moment when a comparable real-world threat was entirely unknown to him or her. This gap between filmic perception and real-world perception is most stark during one of the adverts for a company called Furniture Village, which states that its products will help the spectator, quote, make your home beautiful for the big year ahead. At the time of broadcast, the spectator could not know exactly what was in store for this big year ahead, but Contagion was encouraging the spectator to experience an illusory mastery over perception, suggesting that he or she would perceive any real-world threats which might disrupt this big year ahead. These films are masochistic in the precise Freudian sense, in which an unpleasurable experience is repeated so that it may be illusorily mastered. This masochistic impulse to sustain an unpleasurable experience in order to resolve and thereby control that unpleasurable experience is perhaps most clearly demonstrated in Outbreak, when Sam's assistant Salt prepares to shoot a tranquilizer dart into the monkey so that it can be used to create the cure. A little girl has befriended the animal and she is used as bait to call it out. Tense cutting back and forth from the infected monkey to the innocent but vulnerable child, to the worried parents with Sam, and to Salt preparing to fire, emphasize the unpleasure. The child could be infected, the dart could miss, and the cure could not be found. The connection of this unpleasurable lack of resolution to the illusory mastery of cinematic perception is emphasized when the girl moves to greet the monkey, temporarily disrupting Salt's line of sight. But this unpleasurable irresolution and this lack of perceptual mastery is only the prelude to pleasurable resolution and ostensible perceptual mastery, as the line of sight is restored, the shot is successful, and the cure is obtained. To conclude, in the midst of real-world uncertainty, the fictional certainty of cinematic perception generates a comforting sense of control. Audiences can see threats coming and can reassure themselves that they would survive those threats precisely because of the illusory nature of cinematic perception. Watching a pandemic thriller whilst in lockdown might appear to be a brave confrontation with reality, but the popularity of the genre during lockdown actually demonstrates how we use fiction to grant us illusory control over our worst fears. Watching these films isn't a strange form of penance then, but is rather a strange form of pleasure.